The billionaire pushed the black maid's daughter into his piranha-infested pool. And in the next few seconds, the crystal-clear waters became a red nightmare that would make anyone beg for mercy. Jasmine's body hit the icy surface with a crash that echoed across the mansion's courtyard. The water swallowed her screams as dozens of red piranhas moved like silver shadows, their triangular teeth glistening under the underwater lights. At 23, the young biology student never imagined that her life would depend on the knowledge she had acquired about aquatic predators. "I bet 50 grand she won't last 2 minutes," shouted Richard Blackwood, adjusting the platinum watch on his wrist as he watched from the edge of the pool. His cruel smile spread across his tan face, as if he were watching a private show created for his entertainment. The guests at the annual Blackwood Industries party approached the glass edges of the pool, smartphones already recording. Executives, politicians, and socialites from the national elite filmed a young black woman fighting for her life. And some even began placing bets on how long she would survive. "Someone should call the police," shouted an older woman, but she was quickly silenced by the icy stars of the other guests. No one contradicted Richard Blackwood on his own property. Jasmine held her breath and forced her body to remain still, remembering her lessons on predatory behavior. The piranhas circled curiously, but did not attack her calm movements. What the guests did not know was that she had spent 3 months studying every detail of that pool, every filtration system, every vulnerable spot on the property. Her mother, Carmen, had worked as the Blackwoods' housekeeper for 15 years, cleaning up the literal and figurative messes of a family that treated employees like disposable objects. Jasmine had grown up seeing the contempt in their eyes, but she had also learned all their secrets. Secrets Richard would kill to keep hidden. "Come on, you useless!" Richard kicked a chair toward the pool, trying to stir up the water. "Do the job you were bought for." What he didn't realize was that Jasmine had discovered something about his money laundering operation 3 weeks ago. Documents photographed, recordings made, offshore accounts tracked. Everything was safe in a place he would never imagine, with specific instructions to be released if anything happened to her. As she lay motionless at the bottom of the pool, her lungs burning and piranhas circling around her, Jasmine knew that her apparent vulnerability was only the first card in a much bigger game. Richard Blackwood had made the fatal mistake of underestimating the maid's daughter. If you're wondering how a 23-year-old managed to survive in a pool full of piranhas and turn her near-death experience into the most devastating revenge ever seen against a corrupt billionaire, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will completely rewrite your definition of justice. 3 weeks earlier, Jasmine had accidentally discovered what Richard was really doing with the millions that passed through Blackwood Industries' accounts. While helping her mother clean the main office, a flash drive had fallen out of the billionaire's locked drawer. Simple curiosity turned to horror when she saw detailed spreadsheets of money laundering, accounts, and tax havens, and payments to Mexican cartels. "My daughter shouldn't be here," Carmen whispered nervously, watching Richard shout instructions to his security guards. "He'll kill her just to prove he can." For 15 years, Carmen had silently swallowed every humiliation. She had cleaned blood from carpets without asking questions, destroyed documents without reading them, and watched employees disappear without a trace. All to keep the job that paid for Jasmine's studies at the state university. "Throw more ice in the water," Richard yelled at the waiters, who hesitated for a moment before obeying. "I want to see that in action." The ice cubes created small waves that agitated the piranhas. But Jasmine kept her breathing under control at the bottom of the pool. Her greatest asset was that Richard had no idea who she really was. To him, She was just the maid's little girl who occasionally showed up to pick up her mother. What he never knew was that Jasmine had spent 2 summers working in marine biology labs, specifically studying predatory behavior in Amazonian fish. Her master's thesis was on survival strategies in hostile aquatic environments. Every calculated movement underwater demonstrated years of practical research. $20,000 that she won't come up alive, shouted one of the guests, a senator known for corruption scandals. Richard, your piranhas are disappointing. Maybe she's already dead and sunk, laughed a socialite, adjusting the angle of her smartphone to better capture the eventual carnage. It would be less fun, but at least it would end this charade. Richard walked to the edge of the pool, his face red with anger. This was not the display of power he had planned for his influential guests. He had promised entertainment, and a quick death would ruin his entire reputation as a creative host. Carmen, he yelled, spotting the housekeeper among the terrified staff. Your useless daughter is ruining my party. When she dies, you have 2 choices. Clean up the mess or join her. Carmen closed her eyes, tears rolling silently down her face. She had known Richard for 15 years and knew exactly what he was capable of. She had seen him order torture for reasons less serious than a ruined party. Under the water, Jasmine heard every muffled word. The threat against her mother ignited a controlled rage that she channeled into her survival strategy. Richard had made 2 fatal mistakes, completely underestimating her intelligence and threatening the only person in the world she loved unconditionally. The flash drive with all the evidence was safe in her advisor's apartment, along with specific instructions to contact the FBI if anything happened to her. But Jasmine had gone beyond digital evidence. For 3 weeks, she had photographed documents, recorded conversations, and mapped out Richard's entire criminal operation. Divers! Richard shouted to his security guards, bring equipment, and get that body out of my pool before it rots. The security guards rushed to fetch diving equipment, but Jasmine knew she had at most 5 minutes before they discovered she was alive. 5 minutes to execute the first phase of a plan she had rehearsed mentally dozens of times. She had studied every entrance and exit of the mansion, every security system, every blind spot of the cameras. More importantly, she knew exactly where Richard kept the master control that operated all the electronic systems on the property, from the sound system to the door locks. Boss, we found diving equipment in the garage, a security guard reported. 10 minutes and we'll get her out of there. Richard smiled cruelly, imagining how he would describe this evening to other billionaires at future private gatherings. The story of the black maid who defied his authority and was devoured by piranhas would become a legend whispered among the elite. A warning about what happened to those who forgot their place. For a moment, when the water became strangely calm and Jasmine disappeared completely from view, everyone present assumed they had witnessed a brutal murder disguised as an accident. But anyone who knows true determination knows that it grows specifically in moments when the whole world underestimates its strength. And what Richard couldn't imagine was that every second of his apparent victory was building the foundation for his own destruction. While the security guards rushed to get diving equipment, Jasmine executed the first phase of a plan she had begun 3 weeks earlier, when she discovered that Richard Blackwood was not just an arrogant billionaire. He was at the center of a money-laundering network that moved $50 million a month to Mexican cartels. Underwater, she positioned herself strategically near the pool's main drainage system. During her casual visits to pick up her mother, Jasmine had memorized every technical detail of that property. She knew that the filtration system had an emergency inlet connected directly to the machine room located just below Richard's office. "Where are those incompetent divers?" Richard shouted, his patience completely exhausted. "I want that dead fish out of my pool in 2 minutes." What he didn't realize was that for Jasmine, every extra second was precious. 3 weeks ago, when she had accidentally discovered the flash drive, she hadn't just copied the files. She had photographed every document, recorded conversations, mapped bank accounts, and most importantly, established contact with federal agent Marcus Thompson, an FBI specialist in financial crimes. Thompson had been skeptical at first when a college student showed up at his office with allegations of money laundering involving one of the richest men in the country. But when Jasmine presented detailed spreadsheets showing bank transfers synchronized with cocaine shipments from Guadalajara, his attitude changed completely. "I need more evidence," Thompson had said during their second meeting. "Voice recordings, real-time transactions, something that proves his active participation in the operations." Jasmine had smiled calmly. "Give me 3 weeks." During those 3 weeks, she had discreetly installed recording devices in Richard's office, using her access as the maid's daughter to plant microscopic equipment behind paintings and inside decorative vases. Every incriminating conversation had been captured, including a detailed discussion about how to use tonight's party to finalize a $15 million transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands. "Boss, we found the equipment," shouted a security guard, running back with oxygen tanks and diving masks. Richard smiled cruelly. "Perfect. I want you to bring her body up here so everyone can see what happens to those who challenge me." Carmen watched in utter horror, tears rolling silently down her face. She had spent 15 years protecting her daughter from Richard's excesses, but she never imagined he would go to such extremes. What she didn't know was that Jasmine had meticulously prepared every aspect of this evening, including her own mother's safety. On the morning of the party, Jasmine had given Carmen a small electronic device disguised as a decorative brooch. "It's a gift, Mom. Please wear it tonight." What Carmen didn't know was that the brooch contained a GPS transmitter and a panic button connected directly to Agent Thompson's phone. "Diver, get in now," Richard ordered, pointing to the water where the piranhas were still circling, agitated by the objects he had thrown in earlier. The diver hesitated for a moment, looking at the piranhas visible through the glass. "Sir, maybe we should wait for them to calm down now," Richard exploded, pushing the man toward the pool. "Either you go down there or you join her." It was at this moment that Jasmine executed the second phase of her plan. Using her detailed knowledge of the filtration system, she located the emergency drain inlet and forced it open. The sudden rush of water created a current that dispersed the piranhas instantly, while she allowed herself to be sucked into the pipe system. "What's going on?" shouted one of the guests, watching the pool water begin to swirl into a small whirlpool. The diver who had just entered the water immediately got out, confused by the sudden change in the aquatic dynamics. "The water is moving strangely, sir. The piranhas are all agitated." Richard ran to the edge, his eyes desperately scanning the surface of the water. "Where is she? Where is she?" For the next 15 minutes, while security guards and divers frantically searched for a body that didn't exist at the bottom of the pool, Jasmine was executing the most crucial phase of her plan. The drainage system had taken her exactly where she had calculated, directly to the engine room located in the basement of the mansion. Wet but alive, she emerged from one of the maintenance pipes into an environment she knew perfectly well. 3 weeks of meticulous preparation had mapped out every corridor, every security system, every blind spot of the cameras. More importantly, she knew exactly where Richard kept the master control for all the electronic systems on the property. Upstairs, the party had descended into total chaos. Guests were filming furiously as divers searched every corner of the pool without finding any trace of Jasmine. Richard was in a state of absolute panic, shouting contradictory orders at his terrified employees. "She can't have just disappeared," he yelled, grabbing one of the divers by the shoulder. "Search everything again." What no one imagined was that at that very moment, Jasmine was in the basement accessing the mansion's central computer system with codes she had memorized during weeks of discreet observation. Within minutes, she had downloaded terabytes of compromising data directly to a secure server that Agent Thompson had set up specifically for this operation. Financial files, recordings of conversations, transaction records, contacts of Mexican cartels, accounts of bribed politicians, everything was being transmitted in real time to the FBI while Richard's guests continued to search for a body they would never find in the pool. For a moment, when the water finally calmed and the divers emerged empty-handed, everyone present assumed they had witnessed an impossible disappearance. A young black woman, who had simply disintegrated under the pressure of the white elite, like so many others before her. But those who understand true strategy know that the best moves happen exactly when the enemy thinks they have won. And what Richard could not even dream of was that every second of his apparent victory was being meticulously documented and transmitted to the authorities, who would turn this night into the last party of his life. When Jasmine emerged from the machine room through the back door of the mansion, still wet, but very much alive, the first sign that Richard Blackwood's world was about to implode was the distant sound of sirens cutting through the night. 20 FBI vehicles were approaching the property in convoy, guided by the GPS signals she had transmitted along with the compromising files. "Where is she?" Richard yelled at the divers who had searched every inch of the pool 3 times over. "She can't have just evaporated." His guests were frantically filming, some posting videos in real time on social media with hashtags like #Piranha-Pool and #Richard Blackwood, turning his attempted murder into viral entertainment. What none of them realized was that each post was creating permanent digital evidence of their crime, impossible to delete or deny. "Mr. Blackwood," Federal Agent Thompson's calm voice, cut through the chaos as he walked through the main gate, followed by 20 armed agents. "I need you to keep your hands visible and slowly step away from the pool." Richard's face underwent a complete transformation when he saw the federal badges. The cruel smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of panic that made several guests instinctively take steps backward, as if his proximity could contaminate them by association. "This is private property," Richard stammered, his voice losing all the authority he had displayed minutes before. "You don't have permission to be here." Thompson smiled, removing a folded document from his blazer's inside pocket. "Actually, we do. Search and seizure warrant based on evidence of money laundering, criminal association, and attempted murder. The evidence was transmitted to our servers exactly 17 minutes ago." It was at this moment that Jasmine appeared on the back porch, walking calmly toward the group gathered around the pool. Her presence caused a wave of shocked murmurs among the guests, some lowering their phones in complete disbelief. "Impossible," whispered a socialite, recoiling involuntarily. "We saw her fall into the pool. She was dead." Richard stared at Jasmine, as if he were seeing a ghost materialize in front of him. His privileged mind, accustomed to controlling all variables, simply could not process how a mere maid's daughter had survived what should have been her certain death. "Mr. Blackwood," Jasmine said, her voice cutting through the air with crystal clarity. "Would you like to explain to everyone here why you tried to murder me at your own party?" The question echoed across the patio like a verbal bomb. The guests who were still filming automatically positioned themselves to capture Richard's response, unaware that they were documenting their own complicity in the crime. You were dead," Richard stammered, pointing at the pool with a trembling hand. "The piranhas, I saw you fall." "Are you referring to the attempted murder that was broadcast live on social media by your guests?" Thompson interjected, gesturing to the agents who began confiscating the phones of those present. "We have over 40 different angles of the same crime, Mr. Blackwood, including your confession about the money laundering operations that you shouted while you were in the water." Richard's face turned completely pale as he realized the magnitude of his situation. During his panic in the pool, he had confessed to enough crimes to guarantee decades in prison. All recorded in high definition by people he had personally invited to witness what he thought would be his moment of absolute triumph. "Agent Thompson," Jasmine said, pulling a small recording device from her pocket. "Here are the additional confessions I captured over the last 20 minutes while he believed I was dead. Details about offshore accounts, names of bribed politicians, transfer schedules to Mexican cartels." Richard's eyes widened in utter horror. You've been recording this whole time." Jasmine smiled for the first time all evening, a smile that radiated not cruelty, but justice finally served. "Mr. Blackwood, for 3 weeks, I studied every system on this property. Did you really think that pushing me into a pool would be enough to silence someone with a master's degree in aquatic marine biology?" "Ladies and gentlemen," Thompson announced to the stunned guests. "All those present who filmed or bet on the death of Jasmine Moore will be summoned as witnesses. Your mobile devices contain crucial evidence for the criminal case against Richard Blackwood." A wave of panic swept through the elite group. People who minutes earlier had been enjoying the prospect of witnessing a murder now realized that their own footage made them documented accomplices to the crime. "I have rights," Richard shouted desperately. "Lawyers, diplomatic immunity, political connections." "Funny," Jasmine replied calmly. "That was exactly the attitude that led you to confess to all these crimes in public. Your arrogance was your greatest enemy, Mr. Blackwood." Thompson signaled to his agents who approached Richard with handcuffs. "Richard Blackwood, you are under arrest for attempted murder, money laundering, criminal association, bribery of public officials, and operation of a continuing criminal enterprise." As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Richard looked around desperately at his guests, searching for some sign of support or loyalty. But the faces staring back at him now showed only the same contempt he had directed at Jasmine all evening. "Carmen," Jasmine called, spotting her mother among the terrified employees. "You don't work here anymore, ever again." Mother and daughter embraced in the center of the courtyard where moments earlier Richard had attempted murder. The contrast was too powerful to ignore. Quiet dignity replacing corrupt arrogance, justice prevailing over impunity. "Blackwood Industries' assets will be frozen immediately," Thompson informed them as Richard was escorted to a federal vehicle, including this property, bank accounts, investments, and all business operations. Richard stopped abruptly midway, turning to look at Jasmine one last time. "You don't know what you've done. There are very powerful people involved in this. They are coming after you." Jasmine walked until she was inches away from him, looking him straight in the eye with a calmness that haunted him more than any threat could. "Mr. Blackwood, these powerful people you mention, their names are all in the files I've sent to the FBI. They'll be arrested before dawn." For a moment, As the red and blue lights of the police cars reflected off the waters of the pool where he had attempted to commit the perfect crime, Richard Blackwood finally understood that he had underestimated not only Jasmine, but the entire concept of consequences. Discovering too late that not even all the money in the world can buy impunity, when justice finally decides to collect its outstanding debts. 18 months later, Jasmine Moore was on the main stage of the largest international marine science conference, receiving a standing ovation for more than 3,000 researchers. Her work on the preservation of aquatic ecosystems had revolutionized environmental protocols in 17 countries, and her foundation, Fair Waters, had already prevented 15 cases of industrial pollution. Real change happens when we stop accepting that injustice is inevitable, she said into the microphone, her voice echoing through the crowded auditorium. Every corrupt system has vulnerabilities. Every tyrant has blind spots. The difference lies in studying, preparing, and acting intelligently. Richard Blackwood watched Jasmine's speech on television in the federal prison, where he was serving a 42-year sentence for money laundering and attempted murder. His hair had turned completely white in recent months, and the deep circles under his eyes revealed sleepless nights spent thinking about how a simple maid's daughter had destroyed his billion-dollar empire. His wife had divorced him 3 weeks after his arrest, taking half of the assets that had not been confiscated by the government. His children had changed their last name and refused to visit him. The mansion where he had attempted murder had been turned into a marine research center with a sign at the entrance, Jasmine Moore Institute, where courage and science meet. Carmen now ran a domestic consulting firm that employed exclusively Black and Latina women, offering decent wages and full benefits. My daughter taught me that we don't have to accept crumbs when we can build our own table, she said in an interview with a national magazine. The Blackwood case had become required reading in law schools, demonstrating how digital evidence and strategic planning could bring down even the most powerful criminals. 3 other billionaires were arrested using methodologies similar to Jasmine's, creating a new paradigm of accountability for the economic elite. Prison gave me time to reflect, Richard had muttered to his lawyer during one of his rare visits. She studied me like I was a scientific experiment. She knew my every move before I even made it. In her lecture, Jasmine clicked to her final slide. A photo of the pool transformed into an aquatic laboratory, where dozens of students were researching water purification techniques. Places that were created to destroy can be transformed into spaces that heal. People who tried to silence us can become examples of what happens when we underestimate the power of education combined with determination. Thompson, now regional director of the FBI, was in the front row. The Blackwood case had resulted in the largest seizure of criminal assets in regional history, and Jasmine had become an official consultant for high-level financial crime investigations. The phones of the guests at that fateful party had become evidence in 17 different cases. Several ended up paying millions in fines for complicity, and their social reputations never recovered. The elite who filmed an attempted murder for entertainment discovered that their own footage became the rope that hanged their careers. Have you ever felt like the world was against you? Jasmine asked the audience, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived the unthinkable. Have you ever thought that being underestimated was your biggest disadvantage? I discovered that our greatest strength lies precisely where our enemies think our weakness lies. Richard turned off the television and lay down on the narrow bed in his cell. From the other side of the bars, another prisoner commented, "Was that the woman who put you here? Damn man, she's really smart." For a moment, Richard almost felt something like admiration. Almost. But what prevailed was the bitterness of having lost absolutely everything to someone he had classified as irrelevant. The best revenge is not to destroy those who harm us, Jasmine concluded her speech. It is to build something greater than they ever dreamed of possessing. It is to use our pain as fuel for transformations that benefit thousands of people. It is to prove that intelligence, preparation, and courage are more powerful than any fortune built on the exploitation of others. 18 months ago, Richard thought he was getting rid of a minor problem. Today, Jasmine was one of the most respected voices in social justice and environmental crimes. He tried to silence her with piranhas, but she emerged as a force of nature that no aquatic prison could contain. If this story of transformation and justice touched you, subscribe to the channel to discover more cases of people who turned their greatest defeats into historic victories that changed the world.